Yep, there they are. That's the blazing wings and the milk I'm going to be drinking afterwards. What's up? I'm back. Flea Flicker, week 2. Great day to be here. Let's get started. First game of the weekend. San Francisco 49ers 1-0 versus the Carolina Panthers 0-1. My takeaways from week 1. San Fran looked good, and the only reason they looked good is because they played my Rams, who are terrible. I love Greg Olsen and Kelvin Benjamin this week. San Fran, like I said, they played the Rams, so Rams couldn't do anything on offense. But Carolina's a whole different beast to deal with. And Greg Olsen and Benjamin saw the lion's share of the targets and catches last week, so play them. Carlos Hyde, he looked good last week. 23 carries, 88 yards, 2 touchdowns. That did come against my Rams, LA Rams, obviously. But Carolina did look suspect against the run last week. C.J. Anderson really beat him up there, so I like Carlos Hyde this week. Love Cam Newton this week. Whole different beast than Case Keenum, so have fun, San Fran. Jonathan Stewart, like him also this week. Next game, Baltimore Ravens 1-0 versus Cleveland Browns. Obviously, last week, Ravens were in a really low-scoring game. I think it was 13-7. Steve Smith, 5 catches, 19 yards. Mike Wallace, 3 catches, 91 yards. Kamar Aiken, 2 catches, 14 yards. I don't see the distribution going like that every week. It was a weird week for Ravens receivers. I think Kamar Aiken has a bounce-back game. Mike Wallace, another decent game. He could probably catch another deep ball like last week. Steve Smith, I'm a little iffy on. Ravens backfield, Terrence West had 12 carries, sorry. Forsett had 10. So that's a situation I would stay away from. But in this game, I see it being more of a passing type game. I'll say Terrence West is the guy to play if you have to play a Ravens back. RG3. As I showed you, the Blazing Wings are over here. He is one of the main reasons why I have to eat one. Terrible. He just looked terrible. Couldn't do anything. Completely disgusting. Isaiah Crowell and Duke Johnson. Each averaged over 5 yards a carry last game. That's a good sign for their owners. I like them in this matchup, especially Duke Johnson, because I see a pass-happy game in this game. Terrell Pryor had 3 catches for 68. Corey Coleman, 2 for 69. I mean, I wouldn't play him unless you really want to. That's my advice. Josh McCown, that does bode well, having Josh McCown in. He has shown that he's a capable NFL quarterback, so that kind of raises their stock a little bit. Gary Barnidge, I'm going to say bounce back week for him. He put up a fat goose egg in my standard league last week for me, so I'm just going to predict a bounce back just because he's on one of my teams. Wishful thinking. Tennessee Titans 0-1 versus Detroit Lions 1-0. Matthew Stafford, last 9 games. Listen to this. 22 touchdowns and 2 picks for Matthew Stafford since Jim Bob Cooter took over the play calling duties for Detroit. Yeah, that's right. Jim Bob Cooter. That's his name. He completed almost 80% of his passes last week. You should be starting him, not stashing him on your bench unless you have a Drew Brees, an Aaron Rodgers type. But Matthew Stafford needs to be playing if you have him. 228. That's the combined yards from scrimmage for Amir Abdullah and Theo Riddick last week. Amir Abdullah, one of the few things I got right from week 1. He had a great game. Theo Riddick had an awesome game. Although, don't expect a lot of rushing touchdowns from Theo Riddick. That was his first one he's had since 2013, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah. Flip side, Titans allowed 65 rush yards in week 1 to Adrian Peterson. So I'm leaning more towards Theo Riddick this week for Detroit instead of Amir Abdullah, just for that simple fact. Golden Tate had 7 for 41 yards in week 1. Not great, but good PPR numbers. Not great. Standard. Marvin Jones, he runs a little deeper routes, so he got a little more yards last week. 4 catches for 85 yards. He's a better standard option, I would say. Tajay Sharp in this game. Well, last game he had 11 targets, okay? In week 1, he had 7 catches on 11 targets. If you are in a league that gets points for targets, I suggest picking him up, or a PPR league. He's the number 1 receiver there. Great pickup. Tennessee run game struggled in week 1 against Minnesota, but I think it'll be a little better this game against Detroit. I would say stick with DeMarco Murray over Derrick Henry for now, but I feel like Derrick Henry is going to break out pretty soon. Next game, Kansas City Chiefs versus Houston Texans. Spencer Ware went off last game. 199 yards from scrimmage, and I don't expect that much production this week, but Jamal Charles is out, so he will be starting once again. Travis Kelce had a decent game last week. Macklin also got a late touchdown, kind of boosted his value a little bit. Not a great matchup for them this week against Houston, but I would say decent play in standard and a better play in PPR for those two. 32, that's the number of touches Lamar Miller had last week. Lamar freaking Miller. Dude is a stud. Finally getting the ball now that he's in Houston. Bill O'Brien's feeding him. So, Lamar Miller, keep that tank of a human in your lineup. Let's see here. Love DeAndre Hopkins this week. So, one of the games I was watching last weekend, San Diego and Kansas City, Keenan Allen was absolutely destroying Marcus Peters, who was like the top rookie corner last year. Just torching him until he went down. And DeAndre Hopkins is the same, if not better, at route running than Keenan Allen. So, love DeAndre Hopkins this week. Will Fuller, if you haven't heard, is a stud. Okay, he's a rookie wide receiver for Houston. He had 105 receiving yards last week. 107, sorry, and he's number 5 in the AFC in receiving right now. Get him in your lineup. He had 11 targets, 6 of which were 20-plus yards down the field. So that's great fantasy value. Miami Dolphins 0-1 versus New England Patriots. Arian Foster, one of the big misses I had last week. 100 yards from scrimmage. A lot of it came through the air. I think he had 60 yards receiving. Safe to say I was wrong on that one. Jarvis Landry, decent PPR week last week. Could be another tough week for him. You know, Belichick game plans for the best player on the other team. He might try to take Jarvis out of the game. Kenny Stills, if any of you have him or played him last week, you might know that he dropped a 70-yard bomb for would have been a touchdown. I like his matchup this week because of that Jarvis Landry, take away Jarvis Landry factor. For New England, LeGarrette Blount. This guy is a boomer bust fantasy guy, truly. He's either going to get a touchdown or 2, or he's going to get 20 yards rushing on 19 carries. It's crazy. I like him this week. I think he'll find the end zone at least once. Julian Edelman. Love Edelman this week. Gronk's not playing. Chris Hogan is questionable, so love Edelman this week. I liked Martellus Bennett week 1. He was a dud week 1. And I say stay away until his usage goes up. I think maybe Gronk might need to be back for him to get some targets. Next game, New Orleans Saints versus New York Giants. Another week, another high-scoring Saints game expected. Vegas has this being the highest scoring game of week 2. 53 combined points is the projected score. Willie Snead and Brandon Cooks lead the NFC in receiving, 1 and 2 teammates. Pretty crazy. and it doesn't look to be slowing down against the Giants. Dallas, obviously they had Dak out there last week throwing it, and they still racked up, I think it was over 200 yards. But, I mean, New York is different animal. Eli, Odell, Sterling Shepard showed he's a good option. Victor Cruz is back doing the salsa, so going to be a high-scoring game. Mark Ingram had a rough week 1. The Saints kind of abandoned the run game late. It was a shootout with Oakland. But I like him this week. Rashad Jennings showed fresh legs last week. Was running hard. Like him in this matchup also. Cincinnati Bengals 1-0 versus Pittsburgh Steelers 1-0. A.J. Green is a beast of a human. Top receiver in the league after week 1. Expect much of the same this week. Pittsburgh, although they ended up killing Washington, I think it was 38-16. They are still ranked 28th against the pass after last week, so that bodes well for the Bengals. Brandon LaFell had 91 yards, I think, on 4 catches last week, showing he could be a decent option in a deeper, 10-team, 12-team league. Cincy run game, not good last week, but a much better matchup this week. Pittsburgh gave up 4.6 yards per carry last week. I like Jeremy Hill and Gio a lot in this game. Stick to the big 3 for Pittsburgh this game. I know I was really high on Eli Rogers last week, and he had a great game. One of the few things I got right, obviously. Big Ben, AB, and D'Angelo Williams. Put them in your lineup. Stick with them. Don't get cute. Don't throw in Eli Rogers. Don't throw in, who else? Sammy Coates. Don't do it. Just stick to the big 3. Next game, Dallas Cowboys versus Washington Redskins. The volume was there week 1 for Zeke. 21 touches, only 52 yards. Like his matchup a lot better this week against Washington. D'Angelo Williams absolutely torched Redskins last week, so I like Zeke. Let's see. Dak Prescott preferred the short throws in week 1. Witten, 9 catches for 66 yards. Cole Beasley, 8 for 65. Those guys, if Dak's in there, they are decent PPR options for you. Dez, I said ride the wave last week, but you know what? It's up to you. I mean, I wouldn't play him until I saw more production, but it's up to you guys. Kirk Cousins, spread the ball around in week 1. Deshaun Jackson, Jordan Reed, and Jamison Crowder all saw 10-plus targets last week, so they're decent PPR plays. I like Deshaun Jackson and Jordan Reed in standard also. All right, next game, Tampa Bay Bucks versus Arizona Cardinals. 1-0 Bucks, 0-1 Cardinals. Second highest scoring game according to Vegas. Jameis Winston. Told you he wouldn't be my first choice last week, and he went off against Atlanta. Arizona's secondary is a lot better, but Winston's definitely worth owning as a backup from this point forward. Not high on Doug Martin this week. Arizona's just got a good front 7. Mike Evans looked really good in week 1. He's the only guy on that team really worth owning. I'm not big on Vincent Jackson. Carson Palmer, very efficient in week 1. You should start him this week. He will torch Tampa Bay. David Johnson, 20 touches in week 1. I see Arizona being up in this game, so I would say he gets more carries late, racks up a few more yards, maybe a late tutty. Larry Fitz was reborn last week. He looked great. 8 catches. Only receiver with 10 targets for Arizona, so he's the guy to own. Although this game has shootout potential, so I would say play Michael Floyd or John Brown if you want to. Boom or bust type guys, though. Michael Floyd and John Brown. Next game, Seattle Seahawks 1-0 versus LA Rams 0-1. Russell Wilson, not a joke. He got stepped on by Ndamukong Suh last week, who is a large human. He has been sleeping 90 minutes a night this week to give extra time to ice his ankle. That might affect his performance against any other team, but I'm going to rag on my Rams real quick. He's playing the Rams. I like Russell Wilson this week. The man's going to sleep the equivalent of one night for the whole week, but I like him this week. Thomas Rawls, I'm hearing he's the starter this week. I would play him. LA Rams look terrible. Carlos Hyde had 80 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like Thomas Rawls this week. Doug Baldwin, 11 targets last week. Tyler Lockett had 8. Lockett had 2 big drops on 3rd down last week. So the coaching staff might be a little iffy on him, not throw it to him as much. We'll see. 2.8 yards per carry for Todd Gurley in week 1. I like this matchup a little better with Seattle. Arian Foster had a great game last week, so I think a bounce back week for Todd Gurley. Don't play Tavon Austin until the quarterback play gets resolved in LA, which I don't know if it will. Next game, Indy Colts 0-1 versus Denver Broncos 1-0. Andrew Luck, much tougher matchup this week. Obviously, Denver D, different animal than Detroit D. I like Moncrief and Philip Dorsett this week more than T.Y. Hilton, and here's why. Because when I watch Denver, I don't see them give up a lot of deep balls, deep plays. So I like Moncrief and Dorsett because they run shorter routes than T.Y. Frank Gore, not a great matchup. Play him if you have no better option, in my opinion. Jack Doyle. Let's talk about Jack Doyle. Nobody knew who he was until this week. Had, I think, 2 touchdowns last week. I would say he's a decent play this week, and that's because tougher defenses, I like tight ends because I feel like quarterbacks look for their tight ends against tougher defenses. So Jack Doyle, Dwayne Allen, decent plays. It's probably going to be hit or miss with one or the other. Just throw the dart and see what happens. Favorable matchup for Denver wide receivers, although Demaryius Thomas is dealing with a hip issue, so he might not play. And if he doesn't, Emmanuel Sanders, very solid play this week. Chalk it up. C.J. Anderson, that train should keep chugging along. Playing in the Indianapolis, Colts gave up 11th most rush yards in week 1, 116. So I like C.J. Anderson this week. Atlanta Falcons 0-1 versus Oakland Raiders. 3rd highest Vegas game, 49 combined points. Matt Ryan should be starting if you have him, unless you have a Drew Brees, you know. Let's see here. Devontae Freeman, owners, be very scared, okay? Might be time to hit the panic button. He had 13 touches last week. Tevin Coleman had 12. Tevin Coleman, I think, had 95 yards receiving. Outproduced him last week. Could be winning his job back. So, Devontae Freeman owners, be very afraid. Watch Mohamed Sanu this week. It's going to be another shootout. He had a great game last week against Tampa Bay. And I see much of the same this week. Julio, obviously, the man's Julio. Derek Carr, must start. Another shootout. Latavius Murray, I don't know. That backfield's getting shaky too. Jalen Richard, didn't know who that guy was. 75-yard touchdown last week. DeAndre Washington got touches, didn't produce that well. We'll see. Michael Crabtree and Amari Cooper, start 'em. Shootout type game. Jacksonville Jags 0-1 versus San Diego Chargers 0-1. High-powered offenses. San Diego defense looked really good, at least in the first half against Kansas City. We're sacking Alex Smith like crazy, but I like Jacksonville in this matchup. I think TJ Yeldon and Chris Ivory, if he plays, will have good weeks. Jags receiving core, I'll get to Allen Robinson later in my guarantees I'll tell you guys about. Shootout type game. Melvin Gordon, dangerous play this week, and that's because I think San Diego could get up. Actually, no. Jacksonville could get up early, which will force the hand of Mike McCoy to start throwing the ball, which is why I like Woodhead this week instead of Melvin Gordon. But if you have no better option, put Gordon in. He might get a goal line carry, touchdown. That'll make up for it. Travis Benjamin, Tyrell Williams, like both of them since Keenan Allen went down. Get those guys in your lineup. Bortles and Rivers, huge numbers this week. Get them in your lineup. Green Bay Packers 1-0 versus Minnesota Vikings 1-0. Aaron Rodgers, solid play, not great, I would say. Minnesota's just really good on defense. Eddie Lacy might struggle on the ground, but I could see him catching a few screen passes, maybe finding the end zone. Jordy and Randall Cobb, not a great matchup, but decent PPR plays, I would say. Sam Bradford likely to start in week 2, but I do not like Stephon Diggs this week, and I'll tell you why later. AP might find the end zone. Don't like his matchup this week. Green Bay really bottled up TJ Yeldon last week. I know AP is a different beast than TJ Yeldon, but still, don't like the matchup. Last game, Philadelphia Eagles 1-0 versus Chicago Bears 0-1. Love the Matthews crew, Ryan and Jordan. Carson Wentz showed he's capable last week. Jordan Matthews' stock is going up. Like Jeremy Langford this week, and that's because, like I said, Isaiah Crowell and Duke Johnson each averaged over 5 yards carry last week against Philly. That bodes well for Jeremy Langford this week. So get him in your lineup. Alshon, I like him because Philly, when they did give up big passing plays last week, it was to Terrell Pryor and Corey Coleman, and they were deep passes. So I like Alshon this week. All right, so getting to my picks this week. Waste of space. Stephon Diggs is my waste of space this week. I know he had 103 yards last week, I believe, on 7 catches. One of the few things I got right last week. 7 catches for Stephon Diggs. I don't like it because Demarius Randall, Packers